If you think you've heard the most shocking story, wait till you hear this one. Subscribe for more unbelievable African tales. In one of Johannesburg's most luxurious business centers, there was an old cleaning lady everyone called Mama Khadija. She arrived at work with the first light of dawn every day. Her hands were calloused, her back hunched, her face marked with exhaustion. But there was always a strange sparkle in her eyes that no one could quite understand. That morning started like any other. She began cleaning the office floors, pushing her old cleaning cart from room to room. The wealthy company employees would pass by, ignoring her completely, sometimes even looking at her with disgust, especially the company's arrogant manager, Marcus Thompson. When Marcus encountered Mama Khadija in the elevator that morning, his face twisted in disgust. The cleaning bucket in her hands gave off an unpleasant smell in the confined space. Marcus turned to her angrily and raised his voice. Right there, in front of everyone, he humiliated her. The other employees in the elevator watched in uncomfortable silence as he berated her. Marcus's voice echoed in the small space as he shouted at the old woman. He told her she had no business being in the same elevator as executives like him. He said she should use the service elevator like all the other servants. His words cut through the air like knives, each one designed to remind her of her place at the bottom of the social ladder. Mama Khadija stood there silently, her head bowed, saying nothing. But something happened at that moment that no one noticed. A slight smile appeared on her lips. It was as if she knew something they didn't, as if she could see a future that was hidden from everyone else in that elevator. The young secretary Leah had witnessed this incident and felt sorry for Mama Khadija. When they got off the elevator, she approached the old woman. She touched her shoulder gently and spoke with genuine concern. She told Mama not to feel bad about what had happened. She explained that Mr. Thompson treated everyone that way, that it wasn't personal. Mama Khadija looked at Leah with eyes that seemed to hold decades of wisdom. For the first time, she spoke in a voice that was surprisingly clear and strong. She told the young woman that sometimes life's greatest lessons come from the most unexpected people. Leah didn't understand what she meant, but the words stayed with her. The next day, explosive news hit the office like a thunderbolt. The company's mysterious owner, the billionaire who had been living in America for years, was finally returning to South Africa. And not just returning, they were coming to the office tomorrow. The entire building buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone was panicking, running around trying to make everything perfect. No one knew this mysterious boss. They only knew the initials KM that appeared on important documents. Rumors flew through the office like wildfire. Some said the owner was an old white man from the apartheid era. Others insisted it was a young tech billionaire, but nobody really knew the truth. Marcus Thompson looked more nervous than anyone else. He was organizing his office obsessively, moving things around, cleaning surfaces that were already spotless. He put on his most expensive suit, the one he saved for the most important occasions. He practiced his presentation over and over, determined to impress the mysterious owner. He even called a staff meeting to ensure everything would be perfect. During the meeting, he turned to Mama Khadija, who was quietly mopping in the corner. His voice was harsh and dismissive as he told her not to show her face when the boss arrived tomorrow. He said he didn't want her ruining the company's image with her shabby appearance. Mama Khadija simply nodded and continued mopping, that strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth again. That evening, as Mama Khadija left the building, she stopped at the security desk. The guard, Joseph, was one of the few people who treated her with respect. He always greeted her warmly and sometimes shared his lunch with her. Tonight, she did something unusual. She spoke to him at length. She told Joseph that tomorrow would be a very special day. She said that people would learn an important lesson about judging others by their appearance. Joseph laughed, thinking the old woman was just being philosophical, as elderly people sometimes are. But Mama Khadija's eyes were serious as she patted his hand and told him to watch carefully tomorrow. The next morning arrived with unusual anticipation. Everyone came to work early, dressed in their finest clothes. The office was spotless, every surface gleaming. Marcus had arranged for fresh flowers in every room and even hired a catering service to prepare refreshments for the mysterious owner's arrival. By 9 a.m., everyone was at their desks, trying to look busy and important. Marcus paced back and forth in the lobby, checking his watch every few minutes. The security guards were on high alert. Even the usual office chatter had died down to nervous whispers. But something was strange. Mama Khadija hadn't arrived for work. This was highly unusual. In her 5 years at the company, she had never been late or absent. Not once. Marcus noticed but felt relieved. At least she wouldn't embarrass them in front of the owner. At exactly 10 a.m., a convoy of black luxury cars pulled up to the building. Everyone rushed to the windows to watch. Security guards opened doors. Bodyguards emerged first, scanning the area. Then from the middle car emerged an elegant figure. But wait, this wasn't what anyone expected. It was Mama Khadija, but not the Mama Khadija they knew. This woman stood tall and straight, dressed in an expensive designer suit. Her gray hair was styled elegantly. Diamond jewelry sparkled at her throat and wrists. She walked with the confidence of someone who owned the world. The security guards who didn't recognize her tried to approach, but Joseph, remembering her words from the night before, stopped them. His mouth was open in shock as he watched the transformation. This couldn't be the same woman who had cleaned their offices just yesterday. Marcus Thompson stood frozen in the lobby, his face draining of all color. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He couldn't process what he was seeing. This had to be some mistake. Some terrible, impossible mistake. Mama Khadija, or should we say, Mrs. Khadija Mbeki, walked through the lobby with the grace of royalty. Her bodyguards flanked her, and a team of lawyers and assistants followed behind. She walked straight past Marcus without acknowledging his existence, though her eyes briefly met his with a look that made his blood run cold. The elevator that she had been forbidden from using just 2 days ago now carried her to the top floor. The executive boardroom had been prepared for her arrival. All the senior managers were assembled, including Marcus, who had somehow managed to drag himself upstairs despite his shaking legs. When she entered the boardroom, everyone stood. She motioned for them to sit, then remained standing herself. The room was so quiet you could hear hearts beating. She looked around at each face, her expression unreadable. Then she began to speak. Her voice was different now, commanding, articulate, with a slight American accent. She introduced herself properly for the first time. Khadija Mbeki, founder and sole owner of the company. She had built this empire from nothing, starting with a small cleaning service 30 years ago. She explained how she had returned to South Africa 6 months ago, but decided to work undercover in her own company. She wanted to see how her employees really behaved when they thought no one important was watching. She wanted to understand the true culture of the company she had built. The room was deathly silent as she continued. She talked about what she had observed, the good and the bad. She praised certain employees by name, people like Leah who had shown kindness and respect to everyone regardless of their position. These people, she announced, would be receiving immediate promotions and bonuses. Then her eyes turned to Marcus Thompson. Her voice became ice cold as she recounted every instance of his cruelty, not just to her, but to other junior staff members. She had seen how he had berated the security guards, how he had made the young interns cry, how he had created a culture of fear and intimidation. Marcus tried to speak, to defend himself, to apologize, but she raised her hand for silence. She told him that a company was only as good as how it treated its lowest paid workers. She said that anyone who could not show basic human decency to a cleaner had no business managing other human beings. His termination was effective immediately. Security would escort him out. His final paycheck would be mailed to him. He was never to set foot in any of her companies again. Marcus's face crumbled as the reality hit him. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked for was destroyed in an instant. But Mrs. Mbeki wasn't finished. She announced a complete restructuring of the company culture. There would be new policies ensuring respect for all employees. The cleaners, security guards, and other support staff would receive immediate pay raises and better benefits. An anonymous reporting system would be implemented to prevent workplace bullying. She then did something that shocked everyone even more. She announced that she would continue to work in the building, not as a cleaner, but she would maintain a simple office on the ground floor. She wanted to stay connected to all levels of her company. She had learned more in 6 months of cleaning than in years of reading reports. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Leah found herself face to face with Mrs. Mbeki. The older woman smiled at her warmly, the same smile she had given her in the elevator. She told Leah that her kindness had not gone unnoticed. She offered her a position as her personal assistant, with a salary that made Leah's eyes widen. The news of what had happened spread through Johannesburg's business community like wildfire. The story of the billionaire who had pretended to be a cleaner became legendary. But for Mrs. Mbeki, it was more than just a lesson in humility for her employees. Later, in an interview with a business magazine, she revealed her full story. She had grown up in poverty in rural South Africa during apartheid. She had worked as a cleaner for most of her youth, saving every penny. When she finally got the chance to start her own business, she never forgot where she came from. She had moved to America to expand her business empire, but always planned to return home. The undercover work wasn't just about testing her employees. It was about reconnecting with her roots, remembering the struggle, and ensuring she never became disconnected from reality like so many wealthy people do. The impact of her revelation rippled through the corporate world. Other companies began implementing better treatment policies for their support staff. Business schools taught her story as a case study in ethical leadership and the importance of humility. Marcus Thompson never recovered from the disgrace. He couldn't find work in any major company. The story of his behavior had spread too far. He ended up taking a low-level job in a small firm, ironically reporting to a manager who had once been a cleaner. Life has a strange way of teaching us lessons. Joseph, the security guard who had always been kind to Mama Khadija, was promoted to head of security for the entire building. His salary was tripled, and he was able to finally afford to send his children to university. He often thought about how a simple act of kindness had changed his life. Mrs. Mbeki established a foundation for workers' rights, focusing on dignified treatment for cleaners, security guards, and other often overlooked workers. She used her wealth and influence to change laws and corporate policies across South Africa. But perhaps the most interesting change was in Mrs. Mbeki herself. She continued to maintain close relationships with the cleaning staff, often joining them for lunch. She said these conversations kept her grounded and reminded her of what really mattered in life. One day, months later, a young new employee made the mistake of being rude to a cleaner in the lobby. Before security could intervene, Mrs. Mbeki appeared. She didn't shout or make a scene. She simply walked up to the young man and quietly said words that everyone in the lobby remembered forever. She told him that every person in the building, from the CEO to the newest cleaner, was essential to the company's success. She said that respect was not something you earned with money or position. It was something you gave freely to every human being. She reminded him that the cleaner he had just insulted might be someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone who had sacrificed everything for their family. The young man apologized immediately, not just because she was the boss, but because her words had genuinely touched something in him. This was the power of Mrs. Mbeki. She didn't just demand respect, she inspired it. Years passed, and the story of Mama Khadija became a legend in South African business circles. But for those who worked in that building, she was more than a legend. She was a daily reminder that true power comes not from position or wealth, but from how we treat others. Every morning, Mrs. Mbeki would arrive at the same time as the cleaning staff. She would greet each of them by name, ask about their families, their dreams, their struggles. She knew that each of them had a story, just like she did, and she made sure that in her company, every story mattered. The company thrived under her leadership, becoming one of the most successful and most beloved employers in South Africa. Job applications poured in from people who wanted to work for a company that valued humanity over hierarchy. The company's success proved that treating people with dignity wasn't just morally right, it was good business. One particular morning, 5 years after the revelation, a new cleaner started work at the company. She was young, nervous, and reminded Mrs. Mbeki of herself many decades ago. Mrs. Mbeki took her aside and shared some advice that the young woman would never forget. She said that no job was too small if it was done with pride. She said that being a cleaner had taught her attention to detail, patience, and how to really see people when they thought no one was looking. These skills had made her successful in business. She told the young woman to learn everything she could to save her money and to never let anyone make her feel less than human because of her job. That young cleaner would go on to start her own business years later, inspired by Mrs. Mbecky's story. She would always remember the billionaire who had scrubbed floors beside her, who had shown her that dignity comes from within, not from what others think of you. The story of Mama Khadija teaches us many lessons. It reminds us that we never truly know who we're dealing with when we meet someone. The person serving our coffee might be a future president. The cleaner in our office might be a hidden millionaire. But more importantly, it shouldn't matter. Every person deserves respect simply because they are human. It also shows us that true leaders don't sit in ivory towers. They understand their business from the ground up. They know the struggles of their lowest paid workers because they've been there themselves. This understanding makes them not just better leaders, but better human beings. Marcus Thompson's downfall reminds us that arrogance and cruelty always have consequences, even if they don't come immediately. The universe has a way of balancing things out. Those who abuse their power will eventually face their reckoning, often when they least expect it. But perhaps the most powerful lesson is about the importance of kindness. Leah's simple act of compassion, Joseph's daily greetings, these small gestures of humanity made all the difference. They didn't know they were being kind to a billionaire. They were just being decent human beings. And that's exactly the point. In our daily lives, we encounter many Mama Khadijas. They might be the janitor in our office, the cashier at our grocery store, the bus driver on our morning commute. We have a choice in how we treat them. We can be like Marcus, seeing only their position and treating them as less than human. Or we can be like Leah and Joseph, offering respect and kindness to everyone we meet. Mrs. Mbeki often said in interviews that her 6 months as a cleaner in her own company were among the most valuable of her life. She learned about resilience from workers who smiled despite their struggles. She learned about loyalty from employees who gave their best, even when they thought no one was watching. She learned about hope from people who believed in a better future, despite their current circumstances. The transformation of the company culture had ripple effects throughout South Africa's corporate world. Other CEOs began implementing undercover programs, though none quite as dramatic as Mrs. Mbeki's. Workers' rights organizations used her story to push for better treatment and wages for support staff across the country. Business schools began teaching courses on ethical leadership using Mrs. Mbeki's story as a central case study. Students would debate whether her methods were deceptive or brilliant, but all agreed that the results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction at her company soared to the highest levels in the country. Productivity increased. Profits grew. But for Mrs. Mbeki, the numbers were never the point. In her final interview before retiring, she was asked what she was most proud of. She didn't mention the billions she had earned or the empire she had built. Instead, she talked about the scholarship program she had created for the children of cleaners and security guards. She talked about the families whose lives had been changed because their parents were finally paid a living wage. She talked about walking through her building and seeing former cleaners who had been promoted to management positions, security guards who had gone to night school and become accountants, and young people who had started at the bottom and worked their way up because the company finally had fair promotion policies. Most of all, she talked about the culture change. She was proud that in her company, no one was invisible anymore. The cleaner's opinion was valued in staff meetings. The security guard's suggestions were implemented. Everyone understood that they were part of something bigger, that their work mattered, that they mattered. As she handed over leadership to her successor, Leah, who had grown from a secretary to a capable executive under her mentorship, Mrs. Mbeki had one final message for the company. She reminded them that success without humanity is meaningless. She told them that the measure of a company isn't its profit margins, but how it treats its most vulnerable employees. Her last official act was to establish a permanent position on the board of directors that would always be filled by an elected representative from the support staff. This would ensure that the voices of cleaners, security guards, and other support workers would always be heard at the highest levels of decision-making. On her last day, Mrs. Mbeki didn't leave in a convoy of luxury cars. She walked out the front door like any other employee, stopping to hug the cleaners and security guards who had become her friends. Joseph, now head of security, had tears in his eyes as he opened the door for her one last time. As she walked away, someone started clapping. Then another person joined. Soon, the entire building was at the windows, applauding the woman who had shown them what true leadership looked like. Mama Khadija turned, waved once, and smiled that mysterious smile one more time before disappearing into the Johannesburg crowd. The building still stands today, and if you visit, you'll see a bronze plaque in the lobby. It doesn't mention billions of dollars or business achievements. It simply says, in honor of Khadija Mbeki, who reminded us that every person has value, every job has dignity, and every act of kindness matters. New employees are told the story on their first day. They learn about the CEO who cleaned toilets, the billionaire who ate lunch with security guards, the woman who built an empire but never forgot where she came from. And they're reminded that in this company, success is measured not just by what you achieve, but by how you treat others along the way. The security guards still tell the story to anyone who will listen. They talk about the morning when Mama Khadija walked in as a billionaire, how Marcus Thompson's face went white, how everything changed in a single day. But mostly they talk about the lesson she taught them all, that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in the respect you show and receive. Some say that on quiet mornings, if you arrive early enough, you can still feel her presence in the building. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a standard, a reminder of what's possible when power is used to lift others up rather than keep them down. The cleaning staff, many of whom now own shares in the company, thanks to Mrs. Mbeki's employee ownership program, still maintain the highest standards. They take pride in their work, knowing that their former colleague had shown the world that there's honor in every honest job. And somewhere in Johannesburg, in a modest apartment despite her billions, Khadija Mbeki still wakes up early every morning. She makes her own bed, cleans her own dishes, and remembers the days when that was her job, not her choice. She smiles knowing that she used her second chance at life, not just to build wealth, but to build a better world. The story of the cleaning lady who was secretly a millionaire became more than just a tale of hidden identity. It became a movement, a philosophy, a new way of thinking about work, dignity, and human value. Companies around the world began adopting the Mbeki principles, guidelines for ethical treatment of all employees, regardless of position. Young entrepreneurs sought her advice, and she always told them the same thing. If you want to know if your business is truly successful, don't look at your bank account. Look at how the cleaner in your building lives. Can they afford to send their children to school? Can they pay for medical care? Do they feel valued? That's your real bottom line. The impact of her story continues to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she never imagined. Every time someone chooses kindness over cruelty, respect over dismissiveness, humanity over hierarchy, the spirit of Mama Khadija lives on.